Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking into the life and legacy of SHYAM BENEGAL.
Oh, wow.
A true icon of Indian cinema who sadly passed away recently. You've been kind enough to send in some articles about his career, and the tributes that have been pouring in are really something.
Yeah, it's incredible.
But what was it that made him so influential? Not just in the film world, but beyond. That's what we'll be looking at today.
Yeah, I think to get a grasp of his real impact, we need to go back to the 1970s.
Okay.
It was a very different time for Bollywood then. You know, very formulaic films that were the norm.
Yeah, so I guess kind of like what we see in Hollywood now. You know, those big blockbusters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Very predictable. And that's where this new wave comes in, what we call parallel cinema or new Indian cinema.
Yeah.
A real move away from those tropes towards realism, and often a more gritty look at Indian society.
And SHYAM BENEGAL was right at the forefront of that.
Bro, absolutely.
Yeah.
His early films, Encore, Nishant, Manthan, Bhumika, they really made him a leading voice.
Yeah, and I was reading in one of the articles that Encore was considered like a breath of fresh air, especially at a time when those very formulaic films were dominant. But it wasn't just the style, was it? I mean, his films dealt with some pretty heavy social issues, too.
Absolutely. They tackled those issues head on. You know, Nishant, for example, looking at the power dynamics of caste and class in rural India.
And Manthan, about that dairy cooperative in Gujarat. Even had farmers involved in the production.
It did.
Incredible, right?
Yeah, it really dreams the lines a bit. It seems like each film was a statement on its own. And even later on with films like Zubaida, which featured Karishma Kapoor, a big Bollywood star, that social commentary never went away.
Never went away. No, even though it was a more mainstream film with its cast, still looked at the restrictions placed on women within traditional structures, especially in the context of royalty.
So we're seeing a filmmaker who wasn't afraid to challenge conventions and spark conversations about important issues. But a lot of the tributes mention his impact extending beyond just directing, right? You're right. He wore many hats during his career.
Yeah, and each one contributed to shaping Indian cinema.
Yeah.
There's this fascinating story from Shashi Tharoor, who knew Benegal as a child. He remembers him as a successful ad man. You know, even taking photos of his sisters for that Amul baby campaign.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Do you think that background played a role in his filmmaking?
Maybe advertising requires a really good understanding of how to connect with people, right? How to make complex messages impactful and memorable.
That's true.
So I think those skills could have easily transferred to film.
Yeah.
Especially when you're dealing with social issues that could be sensitive or controversial. And beyond advertising, he held some pretty key positions in the Indian film industry.
Oh, he did. He was the chairman of the Film and Television Institute of India.
That's right.
And he served as the director of the National Film Development Corporation.
Wow.
They were crucial roles. I mean, he was able to nurture new talent, promote independent filmmaking, and advocate for policies that could support a more diverse film industry.
So he had a hand in shaping almost every aspect of Indian cinema. And I believe he was even a member of parliament for a time.
He was. This really multifaceted career gave him a platform to not only create impactful films, but influence policy decisions that would shape the future of Indian cinema.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It really is incredible. I mean, he was clearly deeply respected by so many people across Indian society.
He was.
You know, the tributes from figures like Priyanka Gandhi and Mamata Banerjee really show that.
Yeah, and Priyanka Gandhi's words were really moving. You know, she described his films as a public voice saying, an era has ended with his passing.
It's powerful stuff. But given that his films often tackled sensitive social issues, do you think he ever faced any pushback or controversy? Was this kind of social commentary common in Indian cinema at the time?
Well, you have to remember, this was a period of a lot of social and political change in India. You know, the aftershocks of independence, the emergency. These events really influenced the culture of Benegal's films with their focus on marginalized communities and exploration of things like caste, class, gender dynamics. It definitely pushed boundaries.
So he wasn't just reflecting society, he was actively challenging it through his film.
Exactly. He was giving a voice to those who are often silenced or ignored. You know, making audiences confront uncomfortable truths about their own society.
And it wasn't just the stories he chose to tell either, right? I mean, his style of filmmaking was quite different from what people were used to.
That's true. His films often had this more realistic, almost documentary-like feel. He used long takes, natural lighting, and real locations to really create that sense of authenticity. And the pacing while slower than typical Bollywood films, it allowed for deeper character development and a more, introspective viewing experience.
Do you think that's maybe why some found his films too slow or intellectual? Was he trying to reach a specific audience, or was it more about challenging what Indian cinema could be?
I think it's probably a bit of both. He certainly wasn't afraid to challenge conventions and push those boundaries, but he was also a fantastic storyteller.
Yeah.
Even when tackling complex social issues, his films were engaging, thought-provoking, and ultimately entertaining.
So he wasn't just preaching to the converted.
No.
He was trying to spark a dialogue, maybe even change hearts and minds through his art.
Absolutely. And he did it with incredible skill and sensitivity. He wasn't interested in easy answers or simple solutions. He wanted to make people think, to question their own assumptions.
And speaking of reaching a wider audience, he wasn't afraid to use star power to amplify his message, right?
Huh.
We mentioned Zubaida with Karishma Kapoor, but he also worked with other big names like Shashi Kapoor and Rekha.
Oh yeah, he did. And that was a deliberate choice. By casting well-known actors, he could draw in a bigger audience.
Right.
Including those who might not usually watch parallel cinema.
So almost like he was building a bridge between art house and more commercial Bollywood.
Yeah.
And he even collaborated with big-name musicians, too, like A.R. Rahman, who composed the music for Zubaida.
He did, that's right.
And that soundtrack was just beautiful. Really added to the emotional depth of the film.
It did.
So he was really using all the tools he had. Star power, music, compelling narratives, to make films that were both artistically rich and socially relevant. No wonder his work resonated with so many people. But one thing that stood out to me while going through these articles was his dedication to giving a voice to those marginalized communities. We've talked about his films, but there was also that incredible 53-episode TV series, Bharat Ek Khoj, based on Jawaharlal Nehru's discovery of India.
Bharat Ek Khoj was huge, bringing Indian history to life for millions of viewers. And by showcasing the diversity of cultures, religions, and perspectives that shaped India, he was challenging those often singular narratives that existed at the time.
Yeah, it's fascinating how he could weave together history and social commentary with entertainment so seamlessly.
And that's a big part of what makes his work so enduring. He wasn't afraid to experiment, to push the boundaries of what was considered acceptable or commercially viable. Even take a film like Manthan. The fact that he involved actual farmers in the production, allowing them to contribute to the storytelling, that was groundbreaking for its time.
And that spirit of collaboration, giving a platform to those who are often voiceless, seems to run throughout his career.
Yeah.
He mentored countless actors, filmmakers, and artists, many of whom went on to achieve great things in their own right.
Yeah. His legacy goes way beyond the films he made. He nurtured a generation of creative talent, inspiring them to tell their own stories and to use their art to make a difference.
It's inspiring.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is inspiring to think about all the work he did and the impact he had on so many different levels.
Yeah.
But if we were to kind of sum up his legacy, what would you say are the most important things for our listener to take away about SHYAM BENEGAL and what he did for cinema?
Well, I think one of the most important things is that his work really transcends time and place. His films, they give us a glimpse into a specific period in India's history. But the themes he explores, social justice, identity, the complexity of human relationships, these are universal. They still resonate with audiences today.
So even though the setting might be India in the 70s or 80s, the stories themselves have this timeless quality.
Yeah, exactly. And beyond the themes, there's also just the sheer beauty of his craft. His films are visually stunning, the performances are nuanced, the music, as we've talked about, is often breathtaking. There's a richness and depth to his work that you can discover more and more with each viewing.
You're making me want to go back and watch all his films again. But for someone who's never seen a SHYAM BENEGAL film before, where would you recommend they start?
Oh, that's a tough one. Each film has something unique to offer, but if I had to pick one, I might suggest Manthan.
Okay.
It's a really powerful and inspiring story about collective action and social change, and it really showcases his unique style. Or maybe even Encore. To see those early sparks of brilliance that ignited the parallel cinema movement, it's a film that truly broke barriers and set the stage for a new wave of Indian filmmaking.
Yeah, I think those are both excellent starting points.
Yeah.
But honestly, you can't really go wrong with any of his films. They're all journeys worth taking.
Absolutely. He's left behind such an incredible body of work that I think it'll continue to be studied, admired, and debated for years to come.
Yeah.
And I think that's the mark of a true artist, wouldn't you say? To create something that not only entertains, but also provokes challenges and ultimately endures.
I completely agree, SHYAM BENEGAL, a master filmmaker. a social visionary, a true champion of Indian cinema. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into his life and legacy.
It's been my pleasure.
And to you, our listener, we hope this has sparked an interest in exploring SHYAM Benegal's films for yourself. We think you'll find his work to be both enriching and deeply rewarding. What aspects of his approach to filmmaking resonate with you? Which of his films are you now most curious to explore? Let us know and let's continue the conversation. Thank you for listening.